So welcome everyone, and nice that we could have as many people here as possible. I think we've got about 30 or 40 people who are expected, and then a few others who might come along on the way. I'm getting a phone call at an inopportune time, so I'll just turn my phone off. There we go. My name's Bill Mithen. I'm CEO of the Give Where You Live Foundation, for those of you who don't know me. And it is great to be able to have this conversation, a conversation that matters, and it'll be the first of a series of conversations that we want to have. It won't be the best one. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't say that, because we've got three great people who are going to have a great conversation, but it's obviously difficult to have online. It'll be easier if we're in the same place, and hopefully the ones in the future will be in that way. So I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are all gathering, and we're all gathering potentially on different lands of our First Nations people. In doing that, what I'd like to do is not just do it in a way that is can sometimes be seen as a bit flippant, but just say something a little bit about an acknowledgement. It's a great privilege to be an Australian. We're lucky to be Australians. We're lucky that we were born here. We're lucky in so many ways, and even, or certainly for all the people I suspect on this call, extremely lucky that we had good, solid families, people to help us through, and we live in a country that is one of the luckiest on the planet. And so it's a privilege to be born here. It's a privilege to be Australian. And what makes it even a greater privilege is that we are able to share an incredibly rich and a 10,000-year culture with our First Nations people, and that they share that with us. So despite the fact that this land was never properly ceded, despite the fact that our First Nations people have been treated appallingly since white settlement, our First Nations people continue to hold out an olive branch and continue to share themselves, their culture, and their land with us, and that is one of our true life's privileges. And so, in acknowledging, I'd like to acknowledge the owners, the traditional owners of the land that I'm on, the land that I was born on, in fact, and I now live and work on, and they are the Wadawurrung people. I'd like to thank the Wadawurrung people for their custodianship of this land, and I'd like to thank all First Nations people for the custodianship of all the lands across the country. And I'd like to acknowledge all elders, past, present, and emerging. So tonight is the first of a series of conversations. Maybe reconciliation is another good topic for a conversation for another night, but that's not tonight's conversation. Tonight's conversation is going to be about homelessness and housing and food insecurity, and we have three great people to help us have that conversation. I want it to be a bit like a dinner party, if you like. I've got three people to help me to have a conversation, so I'm not just talking to myself, although I feel like I'm talking to myself at the moment because that's pretty much all I can see on the screen. But I've got three great people to have a conversation with, and hopefully everyone else here is able to listen in and at the end of it learn something, have understood the issue a little bit more, understood the complexities of those issues a little bit more, and maybe thought about what it is that they can do in their lives, in their businesses, with their families, with their friends, to maybe initiate some change in some systems that fundamentally, try and work for people, but maybe don't do the best job that they could. So it's about 5:40. We'll be finished at about 6:20, 5:40 on a Thursday night. In my household, my wife doesn't work on Fridays, and so Thursdays become known as Fake Friday for us. And so 5:40 is normally about the time she says, well, it's a Friday for me, so I'm going to pour a glass of wine. So if that's your thing, then do that. Pour yourself a glass of wine, a cup of tea, whatever it might be, and sit back and hopefully enjoy the next half an hour to 40 minutes or so. Tonight's conversation is part of our Survive and Thrive grant round, and that has just recently concluded. This is in fact the conclusion of it, and that's a really important grant round for us. And to talk a little bit about our Survive and Thrive grant round and tell you a little bit about it, I'd like to introduce Jenny Speed. Jenny is one of our grants and impact coordinators, and her role at the foundation is to look after the Survive and Thrive grant round amongst other things. So I'm going to hand over to Jenny, and by the magic of technology, she's going to appear, I hope. There she is.
I'm there. Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Bill, for that. It's great to have so many of you with us today, and I'd like to firstly acknowledge the Survive and Thrive grantees who have been able to join us tonight. A special welcome to you all. The Foundation's Survive and Thrive grant round focuses on supporting our community with immediate basic needs, such as food and housing, as well as assisting to build resilience and a sense of belonging and acceptance as protective factors. We recognise the need to meet both immediate basic needs so people can survive and build resilience so they can thrive. Within this grant round, we received 49 applications totalling over $1.3 million, and we are incredibly honoured to be able to provide support to 26 of these amazing programs to the organisations you see on your screen now. These amazing community partners are undertaking vital work every single day to ensure everyone in the community has an equitable opportunity to survive and thrive. You can find out more about these organisations and projects on our website and social media, and have been honoured to share some of their stories over the past month. Today, we'll get to hear from 3 of them in more detail. To our funders and donors joining us here tonight, it is because of your support that we can in turn assist these organisations and the critical work they do at a time when many in our region need support the most. Back to you, Bill.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks very much. Before we get started with our conversation, I'd like to introduce one of our corporate partners. So we're really lucky at the Foundation to have a group of organisations that support us, in many different ways, certainly financially, and AWA Alliance Bank are one of those. They've supported us in this grant round for 4 or 5 years, maybe 5 or 6 years now, in a sense of wanting to create greater community connections. So one of the outcomes that we're trying to achieve in this grant round is to increase community connection, increase the way community members connect with each other, connect with the community around them, and decrease, therefore, social isolation. That's aligned strongly with AWA Alliance Bank's values and what they're trying to achieve, and they've therefore supported us now for a number of years in this grant round. So I'd just like to introduce now, to say a few words, the brand spanking new CEO of AWA Alliance Bank, Gavin Heathcote. So welcome, Gavin.
Thank you, Bill. Brand spanking new. Yeah, 6 weeks into the role as the new CEO at AWA Alliance Bank, but I'm no stranger to Give Where You Live, having been a grant panel review member for a number of years and also a loaned executive previously. As Bill said, the AWA Alliance Bank Give Where You Live partnership's been going about 6 years now, and we provide financial support in terms of contributing to the funding for the grant rounds. AWA has been in the Geelong region for over 50 years, and our origins were as the Point Henry Credit Co-op for Alcoa workers. And a little bit like Geelong and Alcoa, our town has evolved over the journey, and as has AWA, and we continue to be a member-owned bank, which is our customers are our shareholders. We're accountable to them, and because of that, we're able to provide the best possible value banking available to them. In fact, we say if we can't guarantee that you're going to be better off, we won't recommend that you come and bank with us. But there's also a social enterprise-like bent to the way that we have set the bank up, and that is we want to continue to be able to invest in the community in which we live and operate. And so in having a profit share arrangement that we have with our community partners, of which Give Where You Live is our most significant community partner, that ensures that the work that we're doing together is going to your grant recipients, like we're going to hear tonight, so that we know that the contribution that we're making through our members and our customers is making a difference in the communities that we live. So we encourage people to consider AWA. If you do, our guarantee is that we won't recommend that you bank with us unless it makes you financially better off. And the benefit is from that, particularly if you mention a link with Give Where You Live, proceeds and surplus earnings that the bank makes from that actually goes back to Give Where You Live revenues. So it's a mechanism to have your banking also provide benefit to the community through our partnership with Give Where You Live. So thanks, Bill, for the opportunity to come along. I can't wait to hear the stories. So the last thing you want to do is hear from a banker. So I think I'll hand back to the Give Where You Live team to take it from here.
Thanks, Gavin. Selling yourself short, I quite like hearing from you. It's fun, banker or not. So thank you very much. Thanks for coming along and saying a few words, but also thanks for AWA's support, continued support. It means a lot to us. Okay, let's get stuck into it. So we've got three great people to try and keep me on track and have a conversation that makes some sense. They'll make some sense, if nothing else. Warwick, Claire and Tracy are here with us. Now I am not going to introduce, that's all I'm going to say about them. I'm going to let them introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves, their jobs, the roles they have in the organisation, and I guess the grant also that Give Where You Live has recently given your organisation. So on my screen, Claire is to my right, and so Claire, you can go first.
Thanks, Bill. So hi, everyone. Nice to be with you tonight on your screens. Nice to virtually meet you. My name is Claire Foreman. I'm the CEO of One Care Geelong, and we are a community hub, a community service organisation located in Candover Street, just off Paco. I'll tell a tiny little bit about me. I started in this role on the 10th of March last year, and then COVID was declared by the World Health Organisation on the 12th. So it's been a fun year and a half, but absolutely privileged to be part of our organisation. So a little bit about what we do. We support those that are disadvantaged, socially isolated, and those that generally need life support through struggles. We have our main programs at the moment is we have our affordable counselling service. We have a coach, which is a mentoring program, our community food bank, and also our community meal program. We've been really fortunate to be supported by Give Where You Live for a number of years, and the Thrive and Survive grant has gone directly to our community-based programs, so the community meal, also our coach program and our community connections program, which is supporting those individually as into our programs. I might leave it there for now, Bill, unless you want me to keep going. Pass the baton.
No, that's good. Thanks, Claire. Tracy?
Yeah, hi, my name's Tracy McPherson and I work at Bethany Community Support, and obviously many people would know about Bethany. We've been in Geelong region for 150 years, working broadly across the community with vulnerable and disadvantaged families. We also have, along with our programs, we have 22 kindergartens as well that we work in different areas. And this project really aligns with Bethany's strategic aims around collaborating and creating equality and social inclusion across the community. And I think that when we talk about affordable housing, homelessness or risk of homelessness, that we really think we have a picture in our mind of what a homeless person is, but the changing socioeconomic, the growth of Geelong, the rental affordability and access to housing has really changed in the last year or two. And our project is really to help address accessibility to housing, to affordable housing, to stop people to entering into the social housing system, and just work with the community to understand the different needs and supports that are available to people when they're trying to access some affordable housing. Thank you.
Tracy, good on you. And last but certainly not least, Warwick.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a good night. Yeah, I'm Warwick from Uniting. We provide a broad range of services across the region down there, but also across the state and Victoria and Tas. We've been lucky enough to be a recipient of a grant and be supported by Give Where You Live, and we're using that money to employ a housing and homelessness worker that's looking to assist an already overburdened system. And as Tracy went on to say, probably in an area that's ever expanding and growing, unfortunately, and that changing demographic is very, I guess it's just an ever expanding area. It's not, there is no one particular person that, meets or makes up the homeless population. It is such a broad range of our community, and it can affect anyone at any time. So, yeah.
So thank you. Thanks, Warwick. That's a good place to start, I reckon. So maybe Tracy and Warwick, try and personalise homelessness for me and for everyone else who's listening. Tell me what's a homeless person look like?
Well, sorry, Tracy, do you want me to kick off?
You go. No, you take off.
I don't think that there is one. I think when people mention a homeless person, the traditional thought that springs to mind is the person sleeping on a park bench or on the city street in sleeping rough or under a bridge, and that's been what we've always thought is that a homeless person, and that obviously that there's always been something else that's contributed, whether it's drugs, alcohol, mental health, or something else that's that's forced them into this situation, and maybe they're choosing that, or they've done something wrong. But that rough sleeper, or that demographic that we would call rough sleepers that you see out in the community, really only make up 7% of the homeless population, and the balance is everyone else from young people, young teenagers, right up to people in the 80s and 90s that we've seen that present, and they can be singles, single member households, single parents, full families. There is no one stereotype that we can predict.
You agree with that, Tracy?
Yeah, and I think when you put also on another layer on top of that is the vacancy rates of rental properties in Geelong is 1% at the moment. So you've got 40 or 50 people going into look at properties. The changes to the Residential Tenancy Act means landlords, mums and dad landlords, are getting out of the market, which makes a certain cohort at risk of homelessness. So we're actually seeing that people, it doesn't actually matter how much you earn, sometimes you're not going to get a rental. And so you're couch surfing or staying at family or friends, it's not necessarily unsafe, but it's crowded conditions, which creates challenges and different, conflict in families. And so actually then leads to people can end up being homeless. So I think we need to actually think about it much broadly than, as Warwick said, like we've always thought it's the man sleeping under the bridge, but that's really, really changing not long ago I was looking for a rental and I was blown away because I've owned my house for a long time and was selling just for to move to something else, and I was blown away by 50 families and at rental viewings and things like that. So I think it's a much broader question, and people think that they're not going to end up homeless, but if you enter the rental market and there's 1% vacancy rate, there's maybe a chance that you will struggle to find something.
Yeah. So I'm keen to come back to that because I think there's this interplay between affordable housing more broadly and social housing and public housing, and sometimes that terminology gets misused, or not intentionally, but just maybe not used in the correct way. But Claire, tell me about food insecurity. Who's typically food insecure? Is there such a thing?
Yeah, I think the short answer to that is there is no typical, or perhaps that the image of who might have been a typical person needing food insecurity has changed, particularly since COVID. So I can also put my hat on for, I'm also the chair of GFAM, which is Geelong Food Access Network. So we represent the agencies in Geelong that are providing emergency service and food access. And, you know, I guess through conversation, even through data, the type of person that is accessing food is ever changing. And I guess one of the things that really was quite alarming to me, but we were seeing it come in our doors at One Care, was those that have never needed to have access food before. And they're all of a sudden in the COVID climate, finding themselves, you know, casual work, all of a sudden they don't have enough. Or, you know, a story that we've just seen so many times is, you know, a family that, you know, husband's working, wife is working casually just to top up, you know, the, you know, to buy groceries, whatever it might be. And then, you know, those casual jobs are just not there like they used to be. And all of a sudden, you know, a family of five have never had a problem providing for themselves and needing to access food services from food banks and those sorts of things. And look, really, to be honest, I think it's quite alarming. Like the data that's come out recently is showing that prior to COVID, those in the casual workforce that were accessing food access is reported by agencies was around 20%. And in April this year, that's gone up to just over 60. And it's quite alarming to see that change in what we would normally consider, if you have a casual job, you'll be fine. Well, you know, that's really changed quite dramatically.
So, you know, it's interesting, isn't it, to think about the casualisation of the workforce and what is sometimes called the gig economy. So, you know, the gig economy was in some ways it was put forward as the solution to work-life balance, right? We're all gonna have work in the gig economy. We're gonna have different gigs. We're gonna do them when we want, when we want, where we want. It's all gonna work perfectly. And then I think bigger companies, often, you know, Ubers and those sorts of companies, took advantage of that and said, "Oh, great, we've got all these workers now who are gonna come and work." But, you know, has that helped?
No.
Absolutely.
Short answer.
No.
Shorter answer is no.
No.
So tell us why it hasn't helped.
I think that there also then hasn't been that security for people, and there's no predictability, and it also makes things very difficult then when you're looking at options, say, for people trying to get out of renting, and, you know, looking to apply for loans and things when they've got no consistent income over periods of time, and that they can't predict or plan what their future is going to look like. So it's made it very tough for people to have security in that space, I suppose, and even, you know, to look at maybe purchasing or buying out of the rental market. So they're staying in there a lot longer, which is then forcing people, I suppose. There's a backlog, isn't there? Then we were talking the other day, Bill, about the reduction in rental properties, and the things like Airbnb that have taken what used to be a private rental is now in the Airbnb market for someone, and so it's no longer there. So these options have just dried up, and it's made it really tough for people. Yeah, so that it sort of feels like that goes back to the issue a little bit, Tracy, that you were talking about around it's like this spectrum housing, you know, or homelessness in some ways, where you start at affordable housing, which you need affordable housing, but if you haven't got enough affordable housing, so you've got rentals only at available at 1%, then people drop out of that private rental market because it's not access to them. So then they go where? Well, they go to the social housing market, and then maybe to the public housing. And, you know, currently in the Barwon region, we've got about 3,800 people who are waiting on a house in the
Yeah. And some,
housing.
And some of the research around is that, you know, last year there was about 5,500 people that required affordable housing, if that be, you know, a low income or a moderate income worker looking for private rental right down to public housing. And there was about 1,500 available. So that, you know, that's really, out of all the rental properties that we have, you know, about 9% are of affordable housing. And then building on from the casualisation of the workforce, we could also look at the top end of over 55s of women or people that have worked casual or have not got a lot of super, then actually it's detrimental to them to be working casual, because that impacts on their super, which impacts on their future housing needs. So there's like, yeah, so it's a really broad thing that we need to look at and try, and every cohort has a different story, I think. But,
So we've got this situation at the moment. Property, everyone makes money out of property, right? You know, like all of us who have got a house that we live in, mortgaged or not, making money out of property at the moment, because the prices are going through the roof everywhere. I don't think anywhere that's not. So we've got this situation where we have this amazing market that exists for those that are in it. It's fantastic. So, but I think, but your project at Bethany that we have funded, kind of goes to the very attitudes within that market and trying to change the attitudes within that market. So I reckon it'll be worthwhile just talking a little bit about what that project is and how you're going to try and achieve some what would be monumental shifts in people's attitudes.
Yeah, so our project is Skill to Build, and it really aligns with really what we're looking at is building community education and working with real estate agents to understand, I think, one of the presenting needs of homelessness, and I think it's about 45% of people who present at homeless services, is understanding the impacts of family violence, and also understanding the impacts of the new rental laws, because there are actually some changes that are in favour of the tenants, but it's, you know, but working with the real estate agents to understand that, and to kind of understand the client group and the vulnerable client group, but also understand that they may actually be great renters or have great rental histories, and supporting them to think about and look at it different, but also in our community education and support with them, the real estate agents and other community-based or other, you know, businesses, or, you know, we could even take this to developers to understand the new government strategies around affordable housing and you mentioned before, Bill, the big build is also just really creating that understanding of the tenants, and also providing them with an opportunity to understand where support services are. So we work with 1 or 2 real estate agents now, and when their tenants are in trouble, they don't leave it to eviction or VCAT. They're actually contacting us, and we're working with them to actually make sure that the tenancy is maintained and retained.
Yep. Right. So to all of you, how important is choice in all of this? So, giving people some choice. So, how important is it that people have some choice in terms of food? As in what type of food they get, where they get it, when they get it. How important is it that people get some choice? In terms of the accommodation that they need or receive, and there's probably an argument out there somewhere. People say, well, beggars can't be choosers, bad luck, just take what you're given.
I think, I'll be just really quick and then I'll let the others, but I think it's about even choice. When we talk about choice, it's about choice of somewhere to live, but it's also about if you established in a suburb, why should your children leave school, and their community connection and their social connection, which actually then just creates a whole lot of other social issues that may have been able to be cut off at the pass if they actually could stay in their own suburb and they're connected to their own community. And I think that's what people don't sometimes understand. Oh, there's a house in, I don't know, St Leonard's. Well, if you used to living in East Geelong or St Albans Park, or that, why would you want to go to St Leonard's? But, you know, so yeah. Anyway, I think that's choice is really important for people, and it's empowering.
I'd echo that, Tracy. Yeah. Yeah, and those longer term effects, you know, on children that have had to change schools, change friends, and especially, you know, if they've gone into crisis housing in one, or they've for whatever reason lost housing in one suburb, gone into crisis housing in another suburb, they've then moved into transitional housing in another suburb, then got their public housing in another suburb. So, you know, it's just so unsettling, and their connections and their development can be severely affected, changing schools, changing friendship groups. So it really affects the next generation as well.
Claire, what about you?
Yeah, look, I think the word that comes to mind really is empowering, and then being empowered to make their own choices, but also empowering them to be able to access and want to access what's there. I think there's been a bit of a shift, I think, in the food access sector, in that, you know, I think traditionally, and this is still super important, that assessing people through the proper channels, it has been the, you know, one of the most significant methods, but we're seeing more of a shift of it being, you know, a less assessment driven option. So, you know, really different types of models, and seeing success there. And say those people that I spoke about before, in terms of, you know, never needed support before. And I know I've had conversations with people like this that have come through OneCare. For a short time during COVID, we had an online delivery service, and I had conversations with people that were performers and musicians, and they said, you know what, I need this so bad, but I'm just too embarrassed to come walk in the door. And, you know, there's those sorts of things we need to think about, like, are we empowering these guys to get the support they need, so they can then follow the channels that they need to and get, you know, get their life back on track, or, you know, do whatever it is that they need to do. And another small thing that we noticed at OneCare, when COVID happened, we were doing pantry packs that were packed by volunteers, and people would come and, you know, and pick up a bag, and out they go. And we've really been thinking about limitations in that, in giving our guys that choice of saying, well, no, I don't want rice bubbles, I'd rather cornflakes. Or we actually had a really funny story, and I won't tell you what the item was, but we had an older gentleman who came in one day with a female product and said, I don't need this. And, you know, it's the little things like that you make you go, you know what, we can make a really slight change and still make sure we're supporting these guys in a really powerful way. And, you know, just a little tweak. So, you know, and again, through a grant from Give We Live, we're able to purchase some shelving and just make that real simple shift. And, you know, for us, we found that the guys were staying longer, standing around to talk, and then we could build those relationships and really supporting people in other ways, and improving mental health and, you know, social participation and those sorts of things. So really, I think choice, access, empowerment, they're really important, particularly when it's coming to, accessing food services.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, I should say to everyone else, if anyone has a question or a comment or anything, just stick it in the chat, and I can certainly ask some questions that, if anyone has anything burning that they'd like to find out a little bit about. So in both of your systems, so I think kind of what we've, in a very short period of time, talked about is the kind of complex nature of things. So, you know, large government economic policies that seemingly don't really affect anything. So I'll use an example, negative gearing. Seemingly, you know, great, helps people, you know, invest and make some money. But there is an effect on that. That means rentals are, there's less rentals, property prices go up. So the rentals that there are more expensive because the property prices are going up, which, you know, flows all the way down the chain, to the point where you end up with people who are looking for social housing and public housing. We don't have enough of that. We've got a state government who then makes a big decision and says we're going to spend $5.5 billion building 12,000 dwellings for public housing, which is fantastic, but that doesn't help people right now, you know, so right now. So they're complex systems, and there's no simple answer. There's no answer from a big, broad macroeconomic policy perspective. There's probably no simple answer from a micro perspective. You guys doing your things, and, you know, it's hard to solve people's issues one by one, and but that's sort of what's needed. But if I could give you a magic wand and say, how would you change your systems? How would you change the homelessness system or the system that relates to housing? Or how would you change the food system or the system that relates to people getting food? Is there something that you've got a burning desire to say that's the thing that I'd have a crack at?
Where do I start? Look, I think it's multi-pronged. The saying in the homelessness sector is there is no cure for homelessness apart from housing, and building enough and having enough of it to go around. I've been in the homelessness sector for 17 years, housing homelessness, and the demand from when I started to now it's just grown exponentially. And as you said, ever since we started treating housing and homes as an investment, as a currency, something to make profit on, then it's put it out of reach of everybody. But I would probably say, in my time, there's been a couple of small investments into earlier intervention, because often people, but not enough to keep pace. People often don't walk into an agency's doors, as you said there before, Claire, and I'm sure, Tracy, you've experienced it as well, until the wheels have really fallen off, because it's that point when people have used up all their own resources and really hit the end of the line, and they've had to swallow their pride to make contacts, walk in the door of some sort of an agency like ours to ask for help. And if we could destigmatise our services and also have appropriate resources so that we could engage earlier and maybe head things off at the pass, that would be brilliant. So rather than trying to catch people at the bottom of the cliff, we were getting them a little bit earlier. Yep. So yeah, that would be brilliant. Earlier intervention, earlier connection, and destigmatisation, I think, of services.
How about you, Tracy? How would you, wave that wand?
Yeah, I think I agree with Warwick. And I think when you say destigmatisation as well, I think it's about removing the shame people feel around being home, having to access services like homeless services or food services. And I think I have I'm very passionate about everything that I do in my job because I have many hats, but in housing and homelessness, I'm really passionate about the aged, the people over the age of 65 that are retired, who have real stories to tell, who are part of our, social fabric, and have contributed, to this community through working in many places like Ford's, an international harvester or whatever, and they've just ended up in this service system that is not really supporting them. And so I think that, I don't know what I would do in that area, but I think that, building more safe, I think the housing needs to be safer. So even if they do have housing, is it safe for them? Is it accessible? Does it actually meet their needs of their growing change, as they get older? And so for me, my magic wand would probably be build an utopia village somewhere, maybe get one of those expensive retirement villages and turn it into a social safe housing place for people that are, that are aging and elderly and experiencing real financial distress, trying to stay in the private rental market because their income's fixed. So the rents go up, but they've still got fixed income. So anyway, utopia.
Claire?
It's a really tricky one. Like Warwick and Tracy, I think, have hit the nail on the head in terms of removing that stigma of asking for help. I think that's really one of the major ones. When I think about like food access, it's, I think for an organisation, so for a community of Geelong, I think we do have a really great variety and we've got services available for food access. And I just hear so many stories where people didn't know about it. Like Geelong, we're doing a really good job in terms of having services there. I think we're really doing a good job. We're talking together. I think we're covering lots of models and accessibility points and all those things. So, you know, I think there's always lots more that we can do, but if we could just, I don't know, it's more billboards or more pamphlets or whatever it is, but I think that's a big part of it. And the other part is, you know, and look, I think as a community, we do a great job, but just that, like, just sharing, just as a community member, of having that heart to just, hey, come here, I've got extra food, or come here, I think I heard about this. And that certainly happens a lot. It wouldn't be great if, you know, all of us in Geelong just had this mindset of just, here, come and share. And, you know, I think that, you know, and that's probably a little bit of a utopian, you know, pipe dream, but it's still, I think it certainly happens in Geelong. But yeah, it's, you know, when you say, you know, wave a magic wand, it'd just be great if there was no poverty, wouldn't there? But
yeah, right. Yeah, well, yes. Now, if I'm just going to start feeling like a bad sort of movie, no poverty. But of course you're right. You're 100% right. So I think we're almost out of time. But I'm going to ask one last thing, and about COVID, and you know, the last 18 months or so, and how that has affected your services and affected, probably more importantly, the people who have had to access your services. You know, the government's response, mostly through JobKeeper. You know, how, you know, maybe talk a little bit about the interplay of that and it finishing, and the interplay of that as well. You know, tell us all about what's happened over the last 18 months.
I would, wasn't sure to jump in, you know, especially people, increases of people accessing services that have never walked in the door before. They've always been able to survive and make do with, you know, roles, whether they've worked in hospitality or whatever, you know, whatever it may be. They might have, you know, worked at the local picture theatre. And as soon as those businesses are shut down, they've struggled to get by. International students, like you mentioned, you know, presenting, because that's what they were using to, you know, supplement their other savings to get by. So it's been wide, broad-reaching, and I would say that, you know, that's put a significant pressure on the system, because it's been an unexpected amount, or I guess an unexpected increase to a sector. So which pre-COVID was already under pressure. So
yeah. I think for me, in my portfolio at Bethany, I actually manage all the family law and counselling services as well. And the family breakdown, relationship breakdown, has been huge. The re-traumatisation even of these continual lockdowns, of having to homeschool, having your family in small confines, it's just really exacerbated people's mental health and the need for mental health support, but also material support as well. So I think that we've just seen a huge increase in people accessing services and needing actually long, you know, really strong supports around their mental health and their relationships. And because if these families or relationships break down, then we have more people entering the rental market and the service system and that kind of thing. So we really try hard to work with them to try and keep them together. Yeah.
Thank you, Claire.
Yeah, well, I think certainly, you know, need for food access has gone up exponentially since COVID. I know I can speak on behalf of One Care. We didn't have a food bank prior to COVID. We had a community meal that was a sit-down meal that we sort of pivoted into a pickup service in the start of COVID last year, that has then grown into a food bank, which basically, due to the need, has now become a permanent program of One Care. So obviously, yeah, COVID has made that really hard. I think when there was JobKeeper and JobSeeker, you know, numbers were sort of stable. When JobSeeker ended, our numbers increased by 10% pretty much overnight, and have stayed at those numbers since. But really for us as a community service that focuses on community connection, those in social isolation, it's just been devastating for them. And, that they'll get the courage to come to the community meal because the restrictions opened up, and then the next time the restrictions have closed the community meal back down again. And we're actually seeing this sort of, I guess it's a bit of a confidence, maybe a consumer confidence for our community meal, but people are a bit shy to come back. And it's taken on average of about 3 or 4 weeks for our numbers to get back. But as the lockdowns have changed so rapidly, we've noticed higher numbers in our food bank, but much lower numbers in our community meal. So I think for those that really don't have a lot of connection in the community and really are socially isolated, you just can't express how damaging COVID has been in terms of loneliness and being able to interact with the community. So I think, programs, the community services that have programs around community participation, being able to run through COVID is one of, I guess, a super important thing.
Yeah. Thanks, Claire. So at 6:20, we said we'd finish about now. So it's so I want to thank the three of you, Claire, Warwick, and Tracy, for coming along and giving up some time and a little bit of time before this as well to have this conversation. I think my job's meant to be to try and summarise it, so that's going to be hard. But and I don't quite know how to do that. But maybe just to say that it's clear that some of these issues, and we've talked about two tonight, but some of these issues appear to be intractable, but maybe they're not. They are certainly not. The solutions are certainly not linear for them, and nor are the problems, and that one problem turns into another, and to come up with solutions, you've got to find multiple things and multiple ways to solve them. And while there's some, I think I would say that while there's some really good intention in the system, so things like the Victorian State Government's big build, $5.5 billion and 12,000 homes to be built in 4 years, the Geelong City Council's social housing plan that aims to increase social housing stock from 3% to 7% in 10 years, and then another 3% in another 10 years. And the council's input and investment into a really big, large facility in Geelong to help with food relief and, helping fund that. There's some great intention behind all of that, but those things alone, I don't think solve it. And I think that from what I gather from you guys is that getting to people early is and always will be important. Destigmatising the issues so that people ask for help and feel able to ask for help and, aren't stigmatised in that is really important. But I think actually probably the big thing is that for the rest of us, people in the property market, people who've got food on our tables, is to have just a greater sense of empathy for people, a greater sense of humanity, and that we know that the demographics and the profile of these people who are experiencing these challenges are varied and wide, and it could be us. And the more we remember that, maybe the better these systems will work and the more help that we'll be able to achieve. So thank you for all the work you do. Thank you for your organisations who are adding to an incredible tapestry of organisations in Geelong in the community sector who do amazing work. And there's a bit of love coming on the chat through to all of you. So that's nice and well deserved. And thanks for being here tonight. And to everyone else, thanks for being here. I hope you've enjoyed it and learned something. And hopefully you can join us again for the next one when we have another one, hopefully in person. And it's almost, possibly dinner's been prepared in your houses already, so that's something you're not going to have to do. Oh, Tracy, bad luck. For those of you who've got out of that, well done. For those of you who haven't, bad luck. And we'll see you all soon. But thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Right.
Thanks.